retired to start another one, basically, and creating a company actually at the intersection of purpose and profit, called Third Drive, and that's kind of from Daniel Pink's book. Who, have you guys ever heard of Daniel Pink? He wrote a book actually called Third Drive. It was actually, this Third Drive was a description of, he studied, it actually came from a bunch of animal studies as well, but it's interesting enough, apes, when they get into what they're doing, they forget time and they actually, enjoy what they're doing. So we're kind of the same thing as primates at some level. And so we have first level, kind of your survival, second level, carrots and sticks. Third drive is that place when you're sort of passionate about what you're doing, you at least enjoy it, you get engaged. How many of you guys are in the third drive? All right, a couple of you, all right? And if you're in a startup and you're not in that third drive, then that's challenging. But you can do it. It's just not an optimal state, right? So we started this company just to kind of help folks here in town, and I'll give you a little background. Usually want to know kind of who this dude is talking to you. You guys all co-look at it. How many of you guys are part of Mass Challenge? And some aren't? Okay, good. So you guys have to be here? No? Try to fill up the room. That's cool. So yeah, and Mass Challenge, you guys all have companies that are going through the program. You guys are almost done, right? This week. Okay. So we can talk a little bit later about how that's going. I'm curious to see what the feedback is, but I've been sort of mentoring some of the companies in here as well. But anyway, I go back to, I was an engineer back in the day, mechanical engineer. Worked for, I came out of school and I was bored with, so I went and taught optical communications back in '84 when AT&T broke up. So I put the first fiber in undersea, across the country. I was one of those guys carrying OTDRs and fusion splicers and running around the country and putting fiber in. So I have a lot of experience in that space. Then I was tired of living in 60 below zero weather in Crookston, Minnesota in the middle of winter and trying to splice, 125 micron the size of your hair together with a blowing band with some dude that has no knuckles, So I was like, I got to get out of here. And then I went to IBM, figured I could move around a lot in IBM. I was an engineer with them for a number of years, got bored with the plant, decided to go where the action was and got them to relocate me to New York City, where I worked at 590 Madison Avenue and ended up building and architecting a lot of the Wall Street networks back before TCP/IP was around. So back when IBM owned the world, it was SNA. Anybody ever heard of SNA Communications? That's so awesome. Like none of it, that's just amazing because it was the IP, not talking about intellectual property, but TCP/IP of the connected world. Every single network ran on SNA, which was funny. So I used to teach SNA fundamentals. So all that learning, useless today, right? And so the funny thing about tech world is the more you learn, you realize over the years how much unnecessary learning that you've actually gained, useless paperweights. So this is not so inspiring. Let's get to the inspiring part, funding. So anyway, I did that for a while, worked at IBM, and moved to New York City, built a lot of infrastructure in New York, realized that I was the first guy to NFS mount a mainframe, if you guys know what that is, on thicknet Ethernet. So if you guys know back in the days, Ethernet used to have to be, you had to poke a hole in the cable to essentially connect to it, right? And all the guys in the glass house were big IBM fans, because IBM owned the glass house, which was the IT stuff, right? But then you had all these long-haired dudes tatted up, earring, all kinds of piercings, and they were the kind of Unix guys, right? And so I got in with the Unix. I enjoyed sort of the Unix hacking world, and so I spent a little time doing systems administration, and we launched AIX, which was IBM's Unix first variant, on Wall Street. Took over, did really well. Actually, nobody wanted to deal with IBM, but I actually had this is one of, I give you some side stories here, but the reason why I find it interesting is, the question is, how did we get something like TCP/IP to become mainstream in Wall Street? Because nobody wanted it. Because it was not IBM. There was these two cultures. It was sort of like this, Unix culture, and there was this IBM SNA culture, right? But I bet this guy who was a senior guy at Payne Weber, basically a lot of alcohol, that if I could get his mainframe, give him access as a Unix hacking dude, he ran all the portfolio management, all the portfolio optimization on Unix systems, HP systems back in the day, and if you could get these systems connected to the mainframe, he had no access. It used to be, he had to wait three years for an application to be developed. Imagine, back in those days. You know, put a request into the IT shop, and it takes 3 years to get something done. And these guys just didn't have the patience for that, right? So we hacked a solution. I went up to Yorktown Heights, where the dudes wear you're on bare feet, and all the PhDs, right? They have all the intellectual property. We actually found a way to take the mainframe and connect Thicknet to it, and kind of get a back door and literally use it as a big file server for the Unix guys. And that introduced AIX on the Wall Street. So if I say this just because if you're innovative, you just can't stand the norm. Like, you hate it when stuff just doesn't work right. It's ridiculous to spend 3 years waiting on an application to be developed, right? In any time frame. So the idea is that we hacked our way around the solution, and I could have been fired from IBM, but at the end of the day, it actually was the first sale of their Unix systems on Wall Street. Now, the Unix system is called AIX. Didn't work very well, so it took a while for us to get there, but that was really the beginning of Unix, which then was really the beginning of TCP/IP, because TCP/IP came in native on Unix. So anyway, you probably didn't care about any of that, but just show that I'm a geek from the back, old days. And then I'm like, you know what? I got pulled into a startup idea, and this was mid-90s now, where the idea was to bring all this telecom infrastructure into buildings and make them smart buildings, right? Put fiber and copper up the riser. We actually used DSL to drive the riser to get to the Empire State Building, 895 businesses, I think, at the time. And we had 62.5%, so do the math, a good number of customers in that one building from lighting it up. So we lit up every third building in New York City, and then we went out to raise capital, and I went to the bankers, Morgan Stanley's of the world, and these guys just didn't get it. It was not old school. We didn't have a lot of revenue. We had a projection, but nobody believed us. So I said, screw this, I'm going to Silicon Valley. I went to Silicon Valley, and there, we literally had standing ovations. We had, if you guys know Kleiner Perkins, you guys heard of Kleiner, you've heard of a bunch of them. Com Ventures, back in the day, was about all the big guys. We basically got everybody we wanted to do our Series A, and we did it. So just tell about that story. We actually raised $1 million of seed capital from some fourth generation real estate dudes in New York City. So you got to find, you guys, anybody in the angel round right now looking for money? Okay, so you have to knock on doors, and sometimes you have to deal with people who just don't get it, right? You got to get through the don't get it until you find the one that get it. But here's a good story. Just a lesson for you in that is that there's a lot of people who don't get it, but there will be people who do get it. You got to find them. It's like a needle and a haystack. You got to keep on keeping on. So this guy, let me tell you a story. This guy was a fourth generation real estate guy. We raised $1 million off of him. Long story short, it took me 6 months to renegotiate, or to negotiate my founder stock and my position with the company for this $1 million. And it was a 60-page contract. Real estate guys like doing deals. They like to win the negotiations. It cost me tens of thousands of dollars in my lawyer fees to actually get that deal done on a company that I built, right? Not fun. So I said, screw this, we're going to California. I packed up literally our team. We went to all the different VCs in California. And here's how I did it. I think actually it makes a lot of sense to do it today. I only went through people that I knew. Since I was a chief technical officer, I had a lot of connections in the Silicon Valley that were trying to sell stuff to me, right? So I went through people that I knew had actually been in the trenches with their board members. And I didn't care about the venture firm, I cared about the people. I'm like, who do you want to go to battle with? Who do you want in your foxhole with you? And went specifically to those individuals and got every single one that we wanted to offer to fund us. So we had plenty of term sheets. We had standing ovations. And so what I'm here to tell you about is how do you get a standing ovation from a VC fund in Silicon Valley? Anybody interested in that? Okay, so that's kind of what I want to talk about, and we can be very frank because we have a small amount. We can talk about some of your gigs. We're going to stop part of the way through and we can talk about specific cases. So if you really want to talk about your gig and you feel comfortable doing that in front of people, then feel free to do that. I'm going to run through this pretty quickly. This is what we do. We enjoy it. So I've taken kind of the learnings from this, and I've got a partner who's in the back there actually, and another partner here. Friends that are just awesome friends, people we like doing like life with, like being in business with. We kind of integrate everything together, but we like helping people. And so for us, the experiences we have, and he's been a rock star literally in Russia today, and he's loving it because the Russian team is doing quite well in the World Cup, first time in a while. So this guy actually helped Boris Yeltsin become really the president of Russia. So, he's a president, I guess I'm president, right? Yeah. Back in the early 90s, he was a #1 rock star, had a hit song, and Boris Yeltsin used that song to ignite the youth against the Communist Party. And he was the guy going from stadium to stadium as a rock star. Now, so he was a rock star turnstile. I mean, he literally transitioned from being a rock star into a business leader. So I was happy to enroll him as a partner, and we've been friends ever since. And Nicole over, you can talk to her. Well, she's got a long history of coming from California in the health and sort of wellness space. If you have something in that space, you want to talk to her. And she's built businesses, and she's one of these people that just everybody likes her. You know, so they put up with me, and they like her. So it's kind of like she does a lot of client relations, and she gets a chance to actually talk to folks and help them see that we're really nice people in addition to people that want to help you. So this is kind of what we do. Just a quick advertisement, strategy development, funding. We do a lot of stuff on the world stage, not just Austin, but we like doing things in our backyard. But this is kind of what the topic of today is, the good, bad, and the ugly. I would do the whistle, but I'm not very good at it. I got it on my phone here, I think. Number one, I want to talk about a few things that I think that are important to funding that you might not have heard before. Okay, and I think you've probably heard, some of you guys have heard the top 10 lists of funding, all the to-dos in funding, right? If you've seen all that stuff, you guys give me a little bit of a nod here, that's it. So you've seen all, you've heard all of it, right? And I'll tell you that every deal is different, but every deal is the same. The things that you need to get funded and stay funded. There's a difference. You can get funded, and then you can die on the vine. That's worse than not getting funded. Imagine 4 years, sweat and blood, 6 years, sweat and blood, and then all of a sudden the deal gets taken away from you. Went from two of us to about 650 people. We raised $250 million. By the way, we did a $60 million Series A. So that's a lot of money, right? I renegotiated my contract in 2 hours and 2 pages long. And they gave me more equity than I had from that dude that renegotiated, the angel that I had to fight with the whole time. So when you get it right, when you find investors you really like, that get your gig and get you, they'll be your best sort of fans. And that's the kind of investors that you want. You want to be really careful about who you put on your board and very careful who you take money from. If you have a gig that you believe in it. Don't sell out. Now, having said that, there's some character things, and there are things that, I don't know how many people will tell you this or not, but I'll just say this has been my experience. I went through a 4-year gig, went from 2 of us to 650 people, operated in 25 cities all over the country. We wired every 3rd building in New York City, and we were killing it, right? I built a $1 billion company, and then got pulled out from underneath me. It was terrible. I went through the S1 process, didn't pull out, but went through the S1 process, went through the, we were set to go flying the jet around the country, and we were all juiced up. It was a lot of fun. Things were going really well, and then the market crashed in April 2000. Everything went back. And when things crash, people start getting nervous, and they start jumping ship, and all kinds of things happen. That's when you need to be in the foxhole with people who like you, and you like them, and you trust them, and they trust you. We had one bad hire that killed that gig that I literally built on my own shoulders, my partner and I. But we both got pushed off the board. Some of it was as a function of the days when all the VCs were managing 40 gigs, and they kept pushing it down to their underlings. And so there were some dynamics there, but there's a lot of lessons. I have a very expensive sort of MBA, if you will, from the School of Hard Knocks. Really interesting. I would not give it up for the world. It was a great experience, but it was a painful experience at the end. I still did very well because I sat on about 20 advisory boards in Silicon Valley, and all of those, we had some good exits out of those deals. So my perspective is one of a guy who's built it, lost it, I built it again and sold it, and I have some scars and I have some learnings and that kind of thing. So that's who's speaking to you today. I'm not going to tell you that I have all the information. I'll tell you my experience, and hopefully that'll be helpful to you. Fair enough? All right. Credibility, number one. This is going to sound like a preaching thing. Maybe 3 C's, right? First is credibility, right? And it's all about this. I mean, really, in your gig in terms of funding, whether you're going to be funded and you're going to do this, whether you're not going to be funded and do it organically, or whether you're going to do it institutionally, it all still comes down to your credibility. Whether your team believes in you, right, as a leader, whether you personally are credible. And this is one of the first things that sometimes is not well understood. When you're building a deck, for example, you want to start with, what is it that you bring to the table that's distinct, right? And some of you may have authority. I may have spent 20 years I mean, I probably have authority in smart buildings. I've 25 years I've been building gigs in smart buildings and smart technologies in buildings. So one would say, hey, if I were doing a deck right now and I was going to do a smart building gig, I might use that as sort of the context to establish authority. And I think one of the things that you do, like, how many of you guys have heard of the hero's journey? Yeah. So that's kind of popular in storytelling, right? It's a very common storytelling. It's like you want to establish yourself as sort of the Yoda, at least, in the space that you're in for people to get confidence in you, right? So the question is, how do you do that? How do you establish authority? You may not have authority. Maybe you don't have 20 years of experience. Then what do you do? Well, you can do other things. You can talk about experience, or you can talk about talent. You might have talent. Maybe you have a MIT sort of background, and you've done this before, and you've done that before. But what people want to hear right away is who you are. Because the best gigs, the best VCs, they don't care, frankly, about what you're doing. First, they don't. It's more about who you are. And can you pull off what you're saying you're doing, you're going to do. It's all about credibility. So, good judgment is another one. What would be an application of good judgment, you think, in a deck? Or what would be a misapplication? What would be either a positive or negative example of good judgment or poor judgment in your investment deck? Well, let me ask you this. If you had all text in your deck, nothing but text, people had to read it, would that be good or bad? I'm trying to get some audience participation. Bad. That's bad, right? Okay, bad judgment. If you have a brand that is isn't well thought out, let me show you an example of one. This was an asset management fund that came to us. They wanted to do crypto assets. And they were trying to bring discipline of Wall Street to the crypto space. That makes sense, right? So it's not just the craziness of the ICOs, but how do you manage them post-ICO? And the dude that brought it, when I did a video with him, he was sitting on his couch with a picture of Star Wars behind him, right? Like Star Wars poster like you'd have in college. Well, he's sitting there in his t-shirt, right? And this was the name of their fund. How many of you would initially say this is a good brand? Initially, yeah. Okay, cool. See, there's always one. And how many of you would think it's a bad brand? What do you think are the issues of branding? Like, what's your first impression when you look at this? And this was your first slide in the slide deck.
At first it sounded okay until you told me you came from Star Wars, so now I go to Star Trek.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought of was the pointy ears, right? Now I love, like live long and prosper, right? But bulk and asset management, if you're pitching to hedge fund dudes who are old dudes, right, who have a lot of money, maybe not the best credibility, right? You're not establishing credibility right away. Secondly, we basically took them and rearranged them and rebranded them, right? How many of you like this better than that? Okay, right? So we actually made it Endeavor. Endeavor's a cool ship that actually, well, I won't get all that. But we actually, created a slide deck that actually got into this idea of cryptocurrency. You can see sort of the background, but yet, you're very logoable kind of thing. Got the blue. Got kind of stuff. This is kind of progressive for Wall Street, but our finance, but we want to have a little edge because you still have to connect with the people in the crypto space, right? So the other thing is videos. You should have something that tells your story. How many of you guys have a video that describes your story in less than 5 minutes? What's this?
Kind of.
Kind of?
Outdated.
Is it a talking head or is it something professionally done that you feel like?
It was professionally done.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, I encourage you to do this because this tells your story. This is a dude here in Austin who's awesome. He's a PhD at the Texas Advanced Supercomputing Center. He's this total, nerd, great guy. He worked on the first cancer project, the genome sort of cancer of a number of things back. He's a big data guy, right? And he couldn't tell the story of his gig. This thing actually won an award. Where was that, Christian? Was that
Communicator Award.
Communicator Award, yeah. So those kinds of things can go a long way to establishing your credibility. It don't cost that much if you get good partners in it. Get it done. And don't be afraid to do that. Okay? Character. You can't buy character. So you got to live with yourself. But you can consider how you put yourself, like how you communicate. And what you communicate actually has a lot to do with whether people have confidence in you. Are you the kind of person that tends to overpromise? Because we all kind of feel it. We're tempted, aren't we? We're tempted to overpromise. all the time, all the time. What do? It's going to change the world. It's going to be the, the language that you can screw a first meeting up quicker by just over-promising than anything else. We think we're going to take 2% of the entire market. That's the word. Don't ever use percentages of market stuff. Never do that. Because there's nothing you can, it sounds good, but it never translates to any plan that could actually get there, right? So make sure that you have sort of this conservative approach. You tend to trust people, right, that are a little bit like, you don't trust car salesmen, right? You just don't trust them. You don't like the slick willies. You trust people that you can actually look in their eye and you know that they're going to put their blood, sweat, and tears to get this done. And we think we'd like to be able to do this, but we think conservatively we can do that. That's some of the best words you'll ever use. Conservatively, we think we can do this. Those words are important. Trust is earned. It takes time to build trust, right? Relationships, it takes time to build trust. How quickly can you burn trust in a relationship? Right? And relationships are everything in capitalism. So the way that I got to all those Silicon Valley VCs, one call, no no's, a no-no, yeah, a no-no. It's not a no-no, it was actually a good no. It was no no's. Anyway, excuse me. Bottom line is I got to everybody easily so I went through somebody that they trusted. So you have to find somebody they trust and enroll them in what you're doing, as opposed to going to the VC directly. Don't ever send your plan via mail, info@abcventure.com. Never do that. Because what you do is you're pumping your deal, and nobody wants the deal that's pumped. Everybody wants a deal that nobody's seen. This is like playing poker. It's like playing, it's like dating. You don't want the girl that nobody wants to date. You want the girl she never gives guys the time of the day, and you work for it a little bit, right? It's the same thing in the venture world. It's just human nature. So you want to actually make your gig look a little bit, do everything you can to make it look a little bit like, a premium deal that we're not shopping. And so the key to that is a target strategy for fundraising, not a scattergun. Don't ever send your deck around. I don't do it, never have. People want to see my deck? No. I mean, you don't say no that way, but you say, let's get on a call, I can walk you through it. I'd be happy to walk you through it, right? But you don't send it around, because guess what? I can tell stories. I won't name names. Well, maybe I will. No, I'll be over for it. One of the most powerful VCs in Silicon Valley, we went in there and they gave us a standing ovation. I'm tempted. I won't say it, it's wrong on camera. But they actually were really powerful VC. They loved our gig. And we said no to them. I don't remember why at the time. I look back, it seems kind of stupid. But I think it's because we made the decision to go with people who were really industry stalwarts. We wanted people who knew our industry. These guys didn't quite know the industry, but they loved the telecom industry. They wanted to get into it. Their background wasn't primarily, they were into Apple and all these other things, So basically, we pitched them, they loved us. When we said no, they were kind of ticked. They kept our deck, which was pretty sizable, and actually went and hired, they thought this was a voice data integration, they went and hired the head of Bell Atlantic's, they were voice guys, had the VP of engineering at Bell Atlantic. They hired a guy in the data world, UUNet, you guys remember UUNet, big ISP? They had some of the top voice and data guys, threw them together in a room and gave them eventually $800 million to build this gig to knock us off. And they used our deck as the architect for that gig. Now, we beat them in the marketplace. Here's classic, and this is why you guys are so valuable. This room, you guys have talent and you have assets on your side that you may not recognize. These guys were $200,000 plus employees, right, in big organizations. The type of animal that lives in a big organization is not you. And so they tried to hire these two guys, give them lots of money, try to create a startup DNA from big company guys, and they came to the marketplace and they basically bulletproofed everything. To go into a building, their minimum cost to get into a building was about $200,000. Mine was a smart build, and you can build as you're successful in the building, you never know which building it's going to take. We were about $20,000. So they had 10 times the cost, and our average tenant penetration was 62.5%. I still remember this, it's 20 years ago. After 6 months of a building being lit, guess what their average tenant penetration was? Less than 10%. So So we had a marketing, we had a strategy. We were hustling. We hustled each building, and we had a very creative strategy. We had a national deal with not Dunkin' Donuts. What's the other one you like?
I like a donut.
Well, I mean the national deal with a donut company. Anyway, we had donuts and Krispy Kreme. That was it. We had a national deal with Krispy Kreme, and we had mugs in the basement. We got to know everybody in the basement. We had a building communication person. We call him building communications person. Basically ran up and down the elevator all day, dated half the people in the building. The salesperson was terrible. It was drama, but knew everybody, and there was an incredible rapport. And anybody who's ever seen their Verizon rep in a building? Like nobody, right? So you go in and they had a personal relationship, and they could call somebody that was actually in the building, could help solve problems, right? So we had this incredible service construct that actually helped us beat these guys. So the other guys raised $800 million and then flamed out and went to zero. So I never want to see somebody go to zero, but there was a little bit of, what do you say? I guess a little bit of
Joy.
I wouldn't say joy. What's the word? A little bit of, that's what you get when you try to knock somebody else off, right? And now all you guys have unique DNAs. You bring your unique skills, talents, passions to this gig. Not everybody else can knock you off. So don't be so afraid about sharing your ideas. Ideas are kind of useless, frankly. It's about the team that you're going to build. So, trust can get killed. Hard work. When you're doing your deck, I can sniff whether somebody's a hustler and whether they're a hard worker and willing to put the work in. If I give you $5 million, what are you going to do for me, right? I mean, that's a real question. Can I trust that if I give you this money, that you're going to work hard and you're not going to just go out and buy, back in the days it was Aeron chairs and, scoping out the whole really nice spaces, and we had a space on 1472 Broadway in Manhattan. It was 50,000 square feet, and it was a killer space, right? Anyway, I won't get into all that, but it was actually really nice, but sometimes we overspent. We had a $12 million a month budget. So that's why we were burning that much. And it was actually because we had 25 markets, and we had our GMs, and we had to get all this trucks and tools and all this crap, all these telecom bands and all that stuff. It was expensive. But you got to put the work in. I slept in the network operations center more nights than I can recall. And I was executive vice president of the company, supposedly. So humility. Good transition. Yeah, it's funny when you're like the executive vice president of no one. There's nobody below you, right? It's really funny. Like some of these titles, guys, you gotta let go of the titles. I think it all goes back to your character. Do you need the CEO title just to be comfortable with yourself? It's a good question, right? I actually like a company where there's no titles. We have roles, but we have no titles. Now that doesn't mean I'm recommending that for all of you. That's just me. I just like to have a certain level playing ground. I don't want to come into a gig feeling like, you all know the guy who's like has to be CEO, right? And he has to have that. It's just his attitude, right? Is one, and that's the one of the first things that'll sniff. VC sniff that in 5 seconds. The good ones, and they won't even. They want people you can go out and have a beer with. They want to be with somebody that they like to be with. So people are still people. And you think about it, one of the reasons we do this gig is because I like getting up every morning and working with the people, the clients we choose to work with, as opposed to having to regret or having to just loathe going to a meeting, right? So the team is everything, and teamwork and how you guys work together is really visible. So here's what happens, if you're doing institutional funding, how many of you plan to go for institutional funding? I'm just curious to get a read. About half the room?
I don't know what that is.
What that means is where somebody is like a venture capitalist or somebody, it's a venture-based or a bank-based or some institution that's raising the capital for you or that's giving you the money, as opposed to an individual angel. So they're sort of like individuals will give you money. And up here we should start with, we'll come back to this, I'll give a slide on this a little bit later, the different types of funding. And I shoot for, most of my advice is around institutional capital, because if you're shooting for the big game, then that's how you want to, if you aim yourself and train yourself to operate well in that game, you'll do well in any game below it, but not the other way around. Okay. So that's the second C. Can you see this? Eye test. This is another thing around your character, around under promising and over delivering. This is a client actually. I built this financial model for this client that was like, oh, we have a financial model. There's this Excel spreadsheet with a few tabs on it, and it sort of projected their business over the next 12 months, and it was You know, I'm like, listen, if I'm gonna put money in you, I want to ask questions. I want to know what happens if you change this doctors per lower level client from 80 to 50. You know, I want to know. So what we did, this is a financial model where all the yellow basically represents inputs to the model, things I can change, assumptions. I bring all my assumptions on one page. If you do that, this is the best tip I'll give you today. If you invest in a good financial model, you can do this for, if you have a partner on your team, ideally you have someone who actually really knows what they're doing, but if you actually create a model where all your assumptions can be questioned and they can see and expose your assumptions to investors, potential investors, you automatically go from a C player to an A player. It's the fact that you actually did this, that you actually care enough to consider all the knobs in your business, and you care enough to be able to expose it to them. What do you think that does? I mean, just for them. Yeah, gives them confidence in you, that you know what you're doing, and you care enough to invest in the things to be able to illustrate what you're doing. See, some of us just want to hack together a solution and iterate as we go. I'm telling you that you've got to combine that with good design and good architectural thinking about your deal. These are all the knobs of a gig in town who just moved here. There's probably a sub $5 million pre-money valuation. And we can talk about all the things. If any of these terms I'm using, you have questions, just raise your hand, I can talk about it. But I just want to give you sort of a framing. How many of you guys have a good financial model like this?
Not that good.
Okay. Okay, good. So this is actually this is about an 18 megabyte file in Excel. Just, you know, you can run the numbers and people can really get confidence about you. So I can't really overstate that. Challenge. So the last C I want to talk about a little bit, open up a little bit. What I want to talk about is the challenge. If you're actually solving the problem of making a better donut, not that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that's not going to get me inspired to give you money, right? You need something that actually, if you're successful, moves the needle. This is for institutional conversation again. What I mean is venture. If you want to go for venture capital and you want to raise more than $1 million from somebody else giving you money, then you want to think this way, right? Think about what is it. I mean, if you're trying to, you know, eradicate obesity, I mean that's a pretty big, lofty goal. Now you got to be careful how much you paint and how you're going to do it. But at the end of the day, it's about the challenge. What gets you motivated? What gets you, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Imagine if you had a fund of $100 million, let's say $10 million, and somebody's asking you to for you to give them $2 million of it. You need to select where you're going to put your money, right? And what are the criteria do you think people use to select where their money goes as venture people?
Impact.
Some people care about impact, but I'll tell you, all people care about impact. Some people care about social impact. Everybody cares about impact if it translates to profitability. You know what I mean? It's a market impact everybody wants. Yeah. But what else? What are some other things you think people look for? Because frankly, the VCs are like, I can't find good deals. And they look at thousands of them.
Adoption, mass adoption.
Yeah, have you proven your adoption? So what we did in the first gig, we actually ran 2 buildings, and we ran them all the way through. We contracted with the owners, we built it out, we sold it, we installed it, we made it work, we demonstrated, and we had over 90% adoption in the first building. 100% in the second building in New York. So we could pretty much translate, we knew what the numbers would be, we kind of did our homework, right? We did the work, put the skin in the game up front. So we weren't trying to get them to jump from here to over here, right? We know that this is possible because, you know, of this. You have to really be careful of your assumptions and what you're stating, right? It comes back to your credibility. Don't overpromise, but be credible in what you're saying. So the challenge, you know, it's about impact. It's about taking a chance and what can you really change, right? Like, what's the what if? You have to inspire people. I mean, have you guys done Landmark? Anybody do Landmark education? It's a pretty good education course. But it's all about what's possible for you. Creating a life of what's possible. And that's what you want to create in somebody else's mind, is what's possible for them in this gig. The hero's journey is not about you as the hero. Who do you think the hero is? The investor. If you put money in here, we can not only return to you, we think probably a 30x return, but over 5 years, but we also believe we can do this, right, which really people care about. Okay? So, opportunity. You have to paint it in the terms that they can understand. What is the opportunity for them? All right, let's get into this organic, private, public, institutional, all words that we use around here a lot. Yeah, sure.
Brian, before you go on, can you talk a little bit about how you funded yourself before you got the VC money? Because there's a
Early
you gotta
stage.
get your 2 buildings at 80-90%.
Yeah.
How do you do that?
That's why we raised $1 million. That's what we did with $1 million. So we went in and actually sold ourselves to a couple 4th generation real estate guys who owned buildings. And we said, we can create this possibility for you. That all your tenants, are going to be more satisfied. And that's what the language they wanted to hear. We just wanted to hear, we knew we could probably generate $3 a square foot in revenue, but we knew that probably generated $10 a square foot for them in terms of incremental rent. And it actually turned out to be that way. Those smart buildings, the building could then market themselves as a smart building. Back in those days, it was a big deal. There was a distinction. There was smart buildings and everything else. There was only a couple of them in Manhattan that had it. So it allowed us to actually have 100%, and all the people that are actually in that building were all startups and tech companies. There were some other things, some interesting stories about how you get fair access and share internet bandwidth to a building when you got like porn, people hosting porn and everything else. And it's an interesting set of challenges that I had to solve. But that's, to answer your question, we actually got some seed capital from originally the team members all put a little bit of money in, and then we went after institutional capital. So one of the things, this is another general principle that to me has been consistent for 30 plus years, is you have to, just lost it, what was it? So the idea of a consistent principle of not trying to, my gosh, just went out the window. Okay, it'll come back to me. So basically, when we're talking to these guys, you had to, I remember what it was, okay. The idea of, if you're an engineer, what do you want to do first? You want to build the widget, right? You want to make sure it works, you want to show people how nice, and so you sit down and you code it all up. That's not really the way to do it. You want to go first look at what the market needs, test the market conceptually, and then you want to sell your butt off and get somebody else enrolled in it to give you money to go build it. I mean, that's the better way of doing it. That way, if you can't get anybody enrolled, then one, it's probably not a very good idea, and two, or you're just not very good at enrolling other people to get behind you, one of the two. So you might need some partners in that. But if you find those people, for example, and they put money in, it was difficult money though. It took us 6 months to get that $1 million. Because after they said the yes, because we had to negotiate. Real estate guys were just painful. 4th generation, 2 young guys. But it's really funny because I don't get in side tangents anywhere. But if you know, anyway. So there's both great guys, but you had to enroll them. We enrolled them, then you have to basically go through the process of the deal and getting it done, and then we can actually go build the buildings, right? So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
It's 2 individuals.
But it sounds like you had, I'm sorry. It sounds like you had pretty much a concept that you had validated through interviews, something along those lines, and that's what you took to these guys and said, this is what we're doing. But you didn't build out any product until you actually got the $1 million in funding.
I think we did a little bit, because it wasn't too hard to just do some prototype tenant, offer internet access to tenant. But we actually, the difference in our model, we provided full voice services. You remember back in the day, Class 5 switches, it was full on. I had a $15 million back office billing system. What a pain in the neck. OSS, Operation Support Systems, BSS, things that the big telcos do and spend millions and millions of dollars. We did, and hacked and made it work. But it was painful. And because of these old constructs of voice switches, it was really a pain in the neck. So we took on a lot more than we needed to. It was the 80, but back then it was the 80% of revenue was voice, and only 20% was data. So if you're going to do a building, you better capture that 80%. Right? So the first $1 million was hard, actually the hardest money. And then after that, we did the $60 million Series A. Then we did $150 million of strategic capital, which is what I would consider, it's different as on in here, but basically in between here is a strategic capital, which means like we had AT&T invest $70 million, we had Microsoft invest $15 million, and we had PSINet, which was a big ISP back in the day, like another $5 million. So we had this consortium, because what we were doing is we were building all this traffic in the local market, right? We had all these buildings connected back to a data center, and I remember that was back in the WorldCom days, and all the long distance carriers were fighting. MCI was bought by WorldCom and all that kind of stuff, and they needed local traffic. So we had a great place. It would have been a multi-billion-dollar gig. So, anyway, let's go on. So basically the idea, you can build your gig organically, you can do it with private funding, i.e. angels, individuals that believe in you. And there's a gig in town here for good friends of ours, Christian and Nicole know him very well, that has a brain assessment platform, and they have like 200 individual investors. How many of you want to go through 700 meetings to get to 200 investors? Probably more than 700 meetings. But 1,000 meetings to get, that's painful, and it precludes some of this when you start doing that. So you have to almost choose which route you want to get, which route you want to go through. If you plan on going the organic route, hey man, just go at it, right? And build it as you go. It's going to be a slow roll, but it's okay. And then you actually own most of the equity, but one of the things we can mistakenly get caught in the trap of is trying to own all the equity. Honestly, I've never been in a gig, I'll take that back. I sold one gig that was like that, but I prefer not to do that because you're not going to have as much of an impact. But for some people it's better. If you're doing some consumer price, some consumer gain, doesn't cost a lot out of the gate, then that's, by all means, that's a good way to go. Private funding, the angel, public. Some of you guys are familiar with Reg CF, the crowdfunding stuff. Any of you guys tried it? Yeah, you've heard of, there's a ton of different websites, right, where you can go out and GoFundMe and a variety of other. And now what's interesting, here's the one interesting thing that's new. How many of you guys have heard of cryptocurrencies? Tokens? How many of you guys play, buy, own? Anybody own any in here? Okay. So we're in a deal right now where we're offering, this is a great point. This is something that if you're interested, if you actually have you probably don't if you're not like into it, but there's a way that you can add cryptocurrencies to your gig, and if you combine your equity with a token upside, gives them liquidity, the balance of liquidity when they deal in addition to the equity. So usually the problem with equity is I give you money, it's going to take me 10 years to get my money back, and I bet as an angel investor invested, I have a terrible hit rate in like 15 years. It's taken 15 years for some of these gigs to die, but I invested back in 2000, 2002, which was really a tough time to invest. But the point is that a lot of them is going to take forever to get your money back. It's really nice to have some liquidity, right, in the meantime. And there's other ways you can structure your deal to actually provide some of that as well.
And are you talking about ICOs there?
Yeah, or somebody else's currency. You might find a way to offer Bitcoin. You might offer some other currency that's already, you don't own it. This particular gig I'm talking about, we have our own currency that we're looking at offering as part of here's an example. We have an event platform. It's going to create software for allowing people to connect in community of trade shows better. And imagine if you have a coin that allows you to grease the skids and allow vendors and exhibitors and how about if you get paid to go to an event versus having to pay to go to the event? That'd be kind of cool, right? And how about if you could actually see people that you wanted to connect with them before you even get there? All that would add value, right? How you can help them run campaigns, etc. So there's a lot of, they're offering their own coin in addition to the equity. So we're working on some interesting, crazy numbers to actually, just because that's a value proposition, our pre-money valuation is getting bumped up quite a bit. All right, so enough about that. That's just sort of a general overview. Thought I'd leave some time for discussion or I've got a few more comments at the end, but if you guys want to talk about any of your gigs, this will be / partial workshop, whatever. If you guys want to, if there's anybody that's really burning to ask questions, like just general dialogue. If you want to figure out, tell me a little bit where you're at, and be happy to give you some ideas if you're interested. Yeah.
So, what's the connotation of bringing on a strategic partner early on? Because I know a lot of times
it's hard to do.
But for my example, I have a startup. It's called Fade.
It's called what?
Fade.
Fade.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a platform that connects men to barbers, hairstyles, and products that are specifically cured to their needs.
Oh, cool.
And content is a big part of what we do, other than just a service. And Snapchat.
Like what kinds of content?
So what we do is, like, if I got on the platform, 21 years old, Indian, medium length hair, XYZ, dandruff.
You have medium length hair? Let me see, man.
Huh? I used to have medium, but it's super short now.
All right. You should.
Yeah.
This dude had medium length hair. He used to have hair down here. He looked like anyway.
Why'd you cut it off?
He got married.
It's not sexy anymore after you're 40.
It's like Fabio's still rocking it, man. He's still rocking it.
It's just pathetic after a while. I still have it. It just doesn't feel right for me.
Yeah. All right. So go ahead.
So we use all this information.
Have you raised any capital yet?
No, we're all self-funded so far, but
Okay.
now we're at a point where the runway is getting really close.
So what's the value proposition? You're connecting who to who?
Primarily, we have two main value propositions. For the local barber, we provide them with a CRM platform at a fraction of the cost anyone else can. And they kind of pump up our numbers by onboarding users because it's almost free for them. We only charge them money when they get.
So that number one's a pretty good idea, because I think barbers hardly manage their clients at all.
Yeah.
Any kind of
Cannibalism is a huge thing.
any kind of proactive way, right? So that's actually one, and they're not technically very
Yeah.
forward thinking, so that's one of the challenges you'll find is the technology adoption
For
curve.
sure, and then our other value proposition is client engagement on our platform is pretty high, because now not only can we recommend products and hairstyles that people truly love, but we connect them with barbers based on merit. Like, oh, this guy,
Sweet,
yeah,
sweet.
can cut your
So you got basically merit-based, like thumb up, thumb down, community curated sort of value, and then you also have the products, which is interesting as well, from people who are similar hair, similar style,
Yeah.
because a lot of that, I can't get stuff that,
Yeah,
it's hard to get people to kind of weigh in on things, actually. That's actually a great idea. So I think there's a strong value proposition, so now what's the question?
Yeah, the question is, so like Snapchat has just announced their initial accelerator. It's not really defined, but since they're a content house, to bring them onto our cap table for the convertible note would be a huge endorsement to what we're doing.
Okay,
Since our marketplace and our trending are very similar to their previous iterations of Discover.
okay.
So, one thing that I've heard though from some conversations with investors in the area is a lot of times when corporations like that come on your cap table, they don't really like that. But some people.
Who doesn't really like that?
Just some people that I've talked to. One of them was
Who doesn't want, like, who are they saying that doesn't want to be on your cap table?
like Snapchat or a L'Oreal or Procter
Yeah,
&
most of
Gamble.
them, well, they're too big to be involved with you.
Yeah.
Most of them will do some kind of strategic deal if you have a strong value proposition to drive something. To me, it doesn't seem like Snapchat, you have a platform, and this
Yeah.
is 2 cents of just talking in 30 seconds here.
For sure.
But Snapchat is a big, broad platform, and you can talk about one specific vertical. What I would do, not saying that if you can work that deal, if you can work it, if you can get them on your cap table, I'd do it. Might be hard. It may sound good, you may waste a lot of time. The other thing is you gotta be careful of the whale you try to eat,
Mhm.
right? So the other thing is, look at, but there's a ton of, in that vertical industry,
Yeah.
there are product companies that would love to be and have distribution. I don't know if you're planning on selling product too.
Yeah, so we don't really sell the products. What we kind of do instead is help them have intimate like brand relationships.
Referral.
Yeah, because it's not even referral. It's like 8-second videos and pictures where we show people using the product in your number.
Okay, so you're basically charging the companies to
Yes.
to basically advertise on your
Yes,
platform. Okay,
advertise.
so that's fine. There's a ton of folks that don't get that kind of qualified.
Yeah,
You have an ability to sort of, it's about targeted advertising, right? And so I would think there'd be a lot of product companies you could go after, not just for advertising, but also strategic alignment. Now the question is, you get into conflict of interest, how much you want to actually be influenced by a product vendor, or whether you want to stay neutral because your customers are really your true customer. The question that you have to answer is, which customer is really your true customer,
yeah.
right? Is it the consumer?
Product
Is it the
company,
supplier?
is it the barber?
Is it the barber? You want to ask yourself, you got to be really clear about that, because if you're serving the community, then you make a stand for the community. It's going to be vendor neutral. You're not going to get paid off, and that's, remember what happened with Yelp? How many feels like Yelp's kind of a sleazy,
Yeah, I mean,
Hey.
they were fighting.
right?
Yeah.
Because Yelp got to this point where they felt they had to sort of sell their soul to the highest bidder, and none of us likes that, do we? So you got to be really careful there. But if you do that, if you stick with the consumer as your top customer, which I think is probably the right thing to do, then they pay the bill. They pay the bill to the barber. They buy the product. That's why, in that case, I'd probably stay close to them, and I'd be all over my marketing. Like, we're neutral. We are all about the community, and you guys tell us what the best products are,
Yeah.
right? But in that, if you look at strategic alignment, then you could still have that message and still do strategic deals, specifically with chain barbers.
Yeah.
That there's a variety of things there, but I would go after smaller deals that are strategic, because your deal is too small to get on the radar of a big elephant
Yeah.
without you wasting a lot of time and difficulty. So now let's get back to the question of funding. You mentioned strategic, but
Yeah, I think, yeah, you kind of clarify what it was.
and how would you actually structure the deal? Let's say you got a Snapchat. How would you structure
So,
the
I mean,
deal?
honestly, they're doing it for the first time. It's the exact same thing as Y Combinator, but by Snapchat.
Also, it's an acceleration program.
Yeah,
That's fine.
$50,000 for convertible.
So that's actually not bad, because, say it again, go ahead.
It's $150,000 for a convertible note, valuation cap 4.5, which is amazing. Valuation cap of 4.5 mil.
4.5, okay. So they're saying they're giving you some, not just in-kind services, they're
If we
giving
can.
you capital, huh?
Yeah,
Is it in kind or is it capital?
Capital, straight
Good.
up, yeah.
So that's a good thing. I would do it all day long, especially if you get them. Snapchat's going to give you visibility to a lot of places. So in that case, in terms of your marketing muscle and your channel, the question is, like, are you launching nationally or are you going?
So we're
Regionally.
initially gonna launch in DFW, and then after that's tested, debugged,
Okay.
everything, expand to Austin, then we can just launch a web portal that barbers can onboard themselves by. After that, it's
That's
all-
going to be critical, is how you scale, and that's where Snapchat could get interesting, is if you were able to scale quickly, show a plan to scale quickly, where your onboarding is going to be the key. I think. Can you simplify the process for a
Yeah.
barber to just
The barber onboarding is
connect
pretty
the dots and go?
because most
simply.
states, and
Yeah.
I think only 4 don't have it, but barber information is public.
Okay.
So I have access to first name, last name,
So-
emails, phone numbers, so they're all in like a
Yeah.
vetted list.
So in this
spot.
case, what I would do is probably go after some good brand name individuals that you want to, like some killer dudes like what's his name that plays on Shark Tank, that good looking dude, black dude,
Damon John.
Damon John. Somebody that I'm just thinking of people who actually have great hair, like whatever, that they care about their look and their brand around their look. Get some brand ambassadors.
Like an
Right.
evangelist.
Yeah, yeah, just people who, and I think if you just, those are the kind of people, I think I would go after angel investors in your gig. Institutional, I probably wouldn't waste my time on it. I think there's some big high net worth individuals that have brand, that have P. Diddy, and some other people, I don't know, like get some folks who care about their hair, right, that look good, like get some people who actually, I'm just throwing names out, I'm like, so not into what's happening. But you get the idea. I wouldn't waste my time with institution, or I wouldn't waste my time with, that strategic makes sense to me if you're doing an incubator, but not necessarily a corporate deal with them. Just 2 cents. Yeah.
Pardon my voice.
Can you tell me your name, by the way?
Yeah, my name is Sam.
What's your
Farhaj.
Farhaj and Sam?
Yeah, pardon my voice. I don't sound like this.
It's all right, man. It's kind of a sexy, raspy voice. Got that smoker kind of.
All my pitches like this. My name is Sam Miller, co-founder and CEO of Vendor. What we do is we connect home gardeners with their neighbors to buy some trade homegrown produce. You seem like the kind of guy who likes local fresh produce.
Yeah.
Right.
You're connecting who and who again?
Home gardeners,
Home gardeners
Home
with who?
their neighbors,
Each other. Okay. I mean consumers.
with consumers.
Could be
Fresh
neighbor
consumers
consumers
here.
with home gardeners.
Most of our sales are made within 5 miles of the buyer. Average time from when it's
Okay.
off the vine and in your hands is 30 minutes. Our stuff's beyond organic.
Are these professional or home gardeners? So home gardeners, they're not really
Straight
professional,
home gardeners,
okay.
beyond organic.
But they can produce more than they can actually consume. maybe.
Absolutely.
Okay.
In fact, they make about $600 of produce per garden per year. They can sell about $200 on average. That's out of a 600 square foot garden in a single family home.
Okay.
So as far as credibility, I've never run a $1 billion company.
You don't have to worry, because this gig won't be $1 billion out of the gate. Like, you don't have to go after the big game. I mean, it could be longer term, but you have to prove a bunch of milestones first, right?
Sure, I started this on my bicycle for $18.
Sweet.
And I'm taking it here, so I feel pretty good about it. My question is, we're fundraising now. We've raised some capital. We're doing a convertible note, 3 mil cap, 20% discount, 4% interest. We're about 3 weeks from launch for our mobile apps. We went from bicycle, website, success, scalability, which we got into about 90 cities in 4 months, just organically.
Well, you got 90 cities and 4 months doing what? You lost me there. Like, what are you actually doing in those 90 cities?
Word of mouth.
It's word of mouth.
We're
Okay,
in
just
90
awareness.
cities in 19 states.
So you had a broad marketing campaign.
No, I was behind the desk at a gym, folding towels and filling water bottles.
Okay, all right, go ahead.
It just sounds weird, believe me.
No, I like the hustle.
Bicycle, how this shit happened, you know?
I like the hustle, yeah.
So it validated the scalability, right? And we got a bunch of feedback on the website and how users use the website and what they would want to move forward. Everything showed mobile apps. So that's what we did. We designed it out. It took 6 months of design, potlucks, brought them all together, user interaction, user experiences, and built out this mobile app. And we got it launched in about 3 weeks. So now what I feel like is we're in this middle stage, pre-product release. Yeah, we already have data, right? But there's nothing that most investors can hold. They can look through, they can use, right? And so I feel like we may hit like a little plateau until the release, and then they can actually see user traction, right? So I've got kind of 2 questions. One is, what strategy just before pre-product launch, in between that, kind of like, our website's not functioning now, so now we're all focused on mobile to, kind of bring up some investors as we raise. Because once we launch, all we need to do is not only just iterate, which, yeah, that's great, we can fucking market, right? Get the word out and get user growth going.
Mm-hmm.
We already know how to do that by zip code.
So you're saying it's not difficult to bring it, you're saying you can bring people on anywhere in the country?
Yeah, but I'm not going to. We're going to specifically target Austin, Pacific Northwest. More importantly, certain zip codes that have or match demographics and
Sure.
psychographics.
Yeah.
And there's about 6.
Portland and Seattle and I'm
And that
guessing,
zip goes within Austin.
right, you said Northwest too, right?
Pacific Northwest, mainly though outside Seattle on the Olympic Peninsula. So this is
Okay.
Washington, there's Seattle, there's the peninsula.
Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Cool.
And so like what kind of strategy as we're pre-launch should we be implementing? That's question one.
Okay, can we
Question
just
two-
take that one? My brain won't remember the second two in a row. I'm bad at that. So let me just ask us the first one. So the questions would be like, what is the, so just walk me through the process. So this guy gets an app. I'm a home grower. What do I got to do?
Yeah, you just sign up, you talk about your garden, or your permaculture, raised beds, aeroponic, hydroponic.
So you have to sell yourself, what you're doing.
You fill out your profile, yeah.
Fill out a profile that represents what I'm doing and what I'm going to grow, what I'm going to have access in, or something like that.
Hydroponic, all from your garden.
Okay, so they have to kind of, there's a learning curve for a home grower to basically at least get their profile set up, right?
Yeah, we walk them through that very
Okay.
process.
And then what? What happens? How do they find How do they find people that care about getting some
They
purple
find
beans or something?
The demand finds them, we have more demand than we can supply.
Okay, and then how do you make money off of it?
We charge 20% service fee to the buyer, so for the growers, it's free to sign up.
So you connect the two, they just work out how they get it from each other?
It's handled between users, yeah. Because initially starting by bicycle, I'm not gonna bike more than 50 miles a week anymore. So we hand it off to the users, they do their own delivery and pickup.
Okay, so what kind of data do you have that you can show to an investor?
Average order fee size, average order fee.
So say that again?
Average order size, shopping cart value.
Okay, what is the average order size?
Currently $16.
Okay,
Yeah, we make about
how
$3.
frequently?
Twice a month. That was off a static website.
Okay, and you're making a couple bucks off of that?
$6 which is just under what Uber made when they first was 7.
Yeah, so this is gonna be a scale gig, right? You gotta get critical mass and specific buyer, seller, micro markets. This looks like a micro market, sort of, you're enabling micro markets, which is really interesting because you can actually do a lot of things downstream of that.
And we plan on being the largest neighbor-made grocery store.
Yeah,
Without any even.
That's actually interesting. I mean, you could even connect people who are selling stuff like, I don't care, I mean, MLM stuff or whatever. I mean, the oil, essential oil, like, just give them a platform to sell whatever they have. It's like a peer-to-peer, kind of a local, that's what I would sell it as a localization kind of a thing. There's a lot of people who hacked at that tree. But what's really cool about that is you could even launch your own currency if you want your crypto. It'd be an interesting gig if you added sort of the ability for people to have neighborhood coins or whatever. But anyway, it's aside. But if you get interested in that, let me know. We can talk about that.
Yeah, we've talked
But
about it. We've talked about it,
I mean,
yeah.
stuff like that just gives you a little sizzle. And what I think the crowd funding opportunity for this one would be reasonably good.
That's my second question.
Yeah.
So you talked about it, we're eyeing it right now, because it's built. The thing was, people in the community, we started in a small town, 4,000,
Yeah.
10,000 people.
And who's your customer? You gotta be careful. Like, this is another go back to who your customer is.
Yeah.
Who's your customer on this one?
25 to 45 full-time, cash strapped, they like buying organic.
No. Who's your customer? The grower or the consumer?
Our main customer is the grower.
Yeah, exactly.
We gotta satisfy.
And
that.
so what I would do is support your local farmer. I mean, I would do something that's all about supporting local, and then maybe he's not a full farmer, but he's a gardener or whatever. But you create a little persona around that dude, a caricature or something. I'm out here hand pulling stuff for your table. I think there's some stuff you could play with it. I think to me it sounds like you can mobilize the people who are gardeners are passionate, right? And they don't really have a market for their goods per se. A few neighbors probably to give it away. This is a way for you to kind of monetize at least your fun in the backyard. So it's going to be a scale game. So you're going to have a really good marketing team, and you're going to have some capital for that marketing stuff. So I think the actual crowdfunding thing would be interesting to look at for you. And I actually like the idea of, you probably want to complicate it at this point, but later on, actually adding a way to mitigate the actual payment stuff. it'd be nice if you could just kind of have a, I mean, so, anyway, it's just,
You can trade.
you can barter, trade, have a currency that works so your gig could be a big gig and could be institutionally interesting once you got to you have to kind of do what we did, take the $2 billion, make it work in a couple markets and show the dynamics and show the uptake, show what you get, how many consumers you get for the dollars spent on marketing. That's going to be the question, like what is the return on effort? But once you get up you hack that hill, you know, you should have a good team. And your gig, I'd be all about getting a great A team, because if you're going to go after institutional capital, it's all about getting a great team.
Those are often the questions we're getting now. What's your CAC, right? And what's your customer lifetime value?
Yep.
And so since all of it has just been organic, we haven't really had that.
You know what,
We're still in our seed rounds.
I wouldn't worry about customer lifetime value. That's ridiculous. I mean, meaning it's nice to know, but it's one of those like newbies. Nobody, I could look at you and you just tell me that short story. I could say, I'm not going to tell you what the customer lifetime value is. I mean, what I'd care about is in some region of zip codes, what kind of uptake can you get? I would want to know some data around, I put this amount of effort in, and this is, what you're looking for is latent demand for people who are going to be the future Uber drivers of home gardening, right? I mean, that's really what you're looking for. You're looking at this shared communal, I think the energy around community and shared assets, the shared economy is something I would tag onto. So your story could be a really good one, shared economy, gardening being one part of it. You know, I wouldn't go and tell the story beyond gardening yet because it just people get lost in the too many things. Keep focused on gardening. I don't know if I would call it gardening or if I would call it something like farming, urban farming. Might sound a little bit more farm to table kind of thing, right? But local table. There's something around that. I actually like the gig. I think it has a lot of potential. I think you got to really careful who your team members are and how you get started. You got to bootstrap this and get it to a point, or you get some angels actually. You get some farmers to buy in, actual guys who actually produce stuff enough at scale, like the urban, you know, to get a local market delivery and partner up with, you know. So anyways, there's a lot of execution points there and a lot of interesting points. So I think it has a lot of potential. You know?
My follow-up question on that was you talked about institutional funding and then you also talked about crowdfunding. Now institutional funding, now apply to crowdfunding. Well,
you know what?
We're giving them back, you know, the people back their food system and they're the ones buying into it in our seed, so we can actually show the data that Sears A.
Normally I don't like the two, but I like the two for this one. Because I think what they want to see is how can I take my $20 million and give it to you after you've proven. What I would use the crowdfunding as a way to proxy demonstrate the interest. You got to make sure you get that interest, because if you don't, then you're sunk. You know, at least you have to rethink it. But if you get the actual interest in specific targeted areas, and just even make that a broad, you know, nationwide crowdfunding thing, then you've got an opportunity to scale up. And I don't think that the VCs are getting used to. In your case, they wouldn't have an issue with it, I don't think. In general, they don't like mixed up cap tables and all that. I understand all that. But if you execute here with $1 million that you raise and you build a $10 million organization, they'll get over it. Because your gig is potentially big enough in servicing the local. It's all about local connection and local commerce, right? And that is a potentially huge gig. But they're going to look at your team and say, is this the team to do it? Or do we take this idea and, I mean, it's not an idea, but the point is they're going to look at, you just want to build a great team.
Sure.
So don't give like, all, huh?
You got one.
Good. I'd be interested. I mean, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about that.
Yeah.
It's a good gig. So, anybody else? Yeah.
Hopefully this is quick. My name's Elizabeth.
Hey, Elizabeth.
My startup is based off of my PhD research.
Can I just stop you 1 second? I know this only went for an hour, right? So we're already at an hour. You won't hurt our feelings if you leave, but I mean, just, it's done. I guess we'll just keep talking. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So PhD research where I discovered a probiotic that when you feed it to cattle, either dairy or beef, it reduces their methane formation by about 50%. So
Wow.
it makes a more environmentally friendly
Okay.
product. And it increases the feed efficiency, so it saves the farmers money, and then it's kind of a double whammy.
How does it increase the feed efficiency?
By basically taking the carbon that they would have farted and burnt and allowing the
So it's
animals
more
to use it.
absorptive? It's actually more
It's not
useful?
absorptive, it's just rerouting it from being lost to the atmosphere to being a part of their metabolism again.
So it's actually additive to their system. It must contribute something, right?
Yes, so it's
Okay.
the carbon is like, the
Yeah.
energy, so that
Yeah.
carbon gets turned into what are known as volatile fatty acids, which is the equivalent to glucose for us,
Yeah,
so.
great. Interesting, okay.
yeah,
And
but we're-
where'd you study this?
A&M,
You're an A&M?
Yeah.
Grad student, or you said PhD student?
I'm done.
Congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you, yeah.
Dr. Elizabeth, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's weird still, but, basically, we're still an R&D company because we don't have FDA approval. We have to do more, trials, basically. But we've gotten a lot of interest and buzz, awards, et cetera, and, we've had offers to be introduced to maybe like 4 to 6 VCs and angels investors. We've gotten conflicting advice, like some of our business mentors basically say like, talk to them and say no, they'll love it, and then it'll be so much easier a year down the line when you're rather, and then other people are like, do not talk to these people, it will be a slap in the face. So I don't know, it's
It'd be a
just like
slap in
another,
the face?
When we say no.
when we say no, basically, because
Oh.
we're not ready to take the
It's
money.
never a slap in the face if you're nice.
I'm not.
Bottom line, well, the thing is, I mean, well, you just don't want to be an ass. I mean, the thing is, the nice thing about, it's like dating. Like any institutional relationship, it's okay to say no, not a problem. And just give them the reasons, Most of them will want to, and this is what they love to do to all of you. Oh, they'll take the meeting, right? Oh, really interesting. Give us a call a year from now when you get this and this and this. And I mean, I've heard that once, I'm sure 1,000 times. Everybody goes through that. And so that's why you have to pick the ones you want. Just because somebody wants to meet you as an institutional VC, don't do it. I would actually, unless you research them and see that the area that they're interested is in the area that you actually
Yeah.
are involved in. If you find a good match, and then you do your homework on The Funded, you guys know The Funded? Check it out, there's your tip for today. TheFunded.com. If you're a CEO of a gig, you get free access to all the crowd input on different VCs, whether good, bad, or ugly. Boom. There ties in the list of the topic tonight. But the good, bad, and ugly in venture world, thefunded.com will give you the scoop, 1 to 5 or whatever it is. Specific individuals. This guy was an ass, he did this to me. I mean, really, it's pretty good stuff. So it's sort of the only.
Last door for
It is. It is. And if you're a CEO, you get it for free. So back to your question. So what's the question?
Should we talk to these people?
General, I
If
can't
we're not
answer.
ready for,
Yeah.
really.
You're not ready because you still got to go through a long haul of FDA approval. How long do you anticipate that to be?
Anywhere from 1 to 7 years.
Yeah. So we went through
Really
the.
high risk.
We've been
and
to
they can
the.
still say no at
I
the end
know.
of the day.
We've been to the FDA approval. What about outside the U.S.?
Yeah, that's a
Possibility. And
Yeah.
what do you really want to do with it? What's the end game? Is it just to produce a probiotic that's a tablet, or how do you envision this being brought to market?
As an ingredient, not a standalone product, but mixed into existing feeding regimes, so we can have more.
Can you protect it?
We have IP and we have an exclusive license
In the US.
in the U.S. And we're working on, patent wall, whatever you want to call it.
It's funny because I hate IP stuff normally,
Yeah,
but this one you probably do want to spend some money on getting stuff lined up. And I hate investors that when the first question they ask you is about your IP.
Yeah.
That's usually a big red flag that they don't know what they're talking about, just so you know. In my world of tech, sort of startup world, put it that way. In this case, IPs can be important just because of the licensability. And so your question is, should you talk to them? What is your plan for the next 12 months, and what kind of capital do you need?
we're, as long as we get the government grants that we've applied for, we're
So good, you're going grants, that's a good thing.
yeah, we have
And-
some already and then we're going for more.
So you're planning to be fully funded with grants.
Yeah, we're pretty competitive. Our other co-founder is an Asian female, so.
That's good. No, that's good. And do you have any big brothers and your big sisters in your pocket, like people helping you that are?
We have the USDA, and then we have like some corporate suitors.
I forgot mentioning this, but I'm going to give you another thing I think is really important. I made more money from being on advisory boards than I did on my gig. I was on like 20 of these in Silicon Valley, and it was like 4 of them were over $8 billion acquisitions. So, good deal, right? Those are the good days. Now, the good days are coming back, actually. So what's interesting to me is advisory boards are gold, free things to do. Get an advisory board of people, but run it in a way that people, 99.9% don't run the right way. You get an advisory board that has the right seers, the people that are in the industries that you want to be in, has leverage into the people you want to get to. get them all bought in, all excited about your gig, give them, this is the way you typically, I'll just give you the kind of the way to do it. 2-year vest every quarter, 3-month cliff, meaning don't give them anything if they don't get involved in the first 3 months. But you give them like 1/8% or something, so over 2 years, you actually have a decent advisory group, and you run it every quarter as a board meeting. Like you run it, and what you do is you get people to basically give you proxy advice. So you get, I won't go on my whole story here, but there's one really interesting story about me on Extreme Networks, was a Ethernet switch company, and Disney was against me. We were 2 guys both on the advisory board, and I represented all these small T1 buildings, and he had dark fiber everywhere, and we were trying to convince the company whether they should do a chip, whatever. But the whole senior management team got to hear us argue in front of them the reasons why I thought what I was saying made more sense in terms of their future direction than the Disney guy, and I won. It doesn't matter, but the point is that who won didn't matter as much as the whole senior team got to hear us and the rationale and the thinking, which provided unity on the team for a path forward. People don't usually have that. What happens is you get salespeople out reflecting back what the customer is saying. My customer says this, my customer, and you get the CFO even, everybody has an opinion on the senior team as to where you should go with your development planning, right? Advisors give you, if run well, give you a chance to actually have a platform for getting real market advice. And if you set your sales this way and you're like 50% off, man, it can kill you. So you've got to be able to tack quickly, and the best way, advisory board's a good proxy for your direction. So in your case, I would have killer, especially being a woman, especially having the gig you have, and just have some really anchor people on your advisory board. And here's the other thing, go big. People love to be on the advisory board, not because of your gig actually, because of who else they meet on the advisory board. I had some of the coolest relationships. The guy who started these voice switching stuff. Anyway, long story. Anyway, all these different stories are interesting because I was welcomed into this incredible crowd that's typically twice my age, but really cool people, and that was really valuable for all of us. And so, don't be afraid to don't undersell yourself in terms of your ability to get like some serious people on your thing, because you could provide this as a sustainability gig. This is a global warming, the whole, methane and cows, the whole story, right? Big issue. They measure at UT how many cows fart per square, whatever, hectare. I mean, it's really funny. Methane contribution to the atmosphere, right, here in UT. So, we were building methane sensors in the oil field and realized that oil field methane wasn't even close to the cow methane. It was really interesting. So, advisory boards, definitely do that, and they will lead you to capital.
Yeah.
But institutions at this stage, I wouldn't say don't do it. I just would say, and you're going to waste a lot of time doing it. As long as you can say no in a nice way and just say, not no, but like they're not going to want to they may not want to give you money. Most of them will just take your time and say, we'll keep tracking on you. If you don't need institutional capital, I would probably look at, again, do the research, figure out who's close to you, who really is in this space, who could provide some leverage. I think strategic partners could be really interesting, right? I mean, grain company, all the people that do the big productions for big commercial cattle sort of stuff could be interesting potential partners or advisors. I'd look at advisors. When you ask somebody to be an advisor, you're not asking anything of them besides a couple hours a quarter, So you can ask anybody. Any other questions about that? I'm sorry.
No, that was it.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Hi, I'm John. My background's in early cancer diagnostics and biopharmaceutical development. And while I was working in those areas, I realized that the technologies that we use there, these real cool new tech to fight cancer, weren't being applied to the environment at all. So we found ways to apply them in that direction. So right now we have a product that does
applying what to the environment?
Applying cancer tech, biotechnology, molecular biology stuff to the field of environmental management.
Is this just data analysis, or is this something more than that?
More than that. So basically, the way I'm working with invasive species right now is one of the big things. If you think about the challenge in detecting cancer early, you're looking for something that's very rare, but very similar to everything else in the body.
Interesting.
Right? And it's the same thing.
Insects or anything else could be,
It's a big bag of chemicals, you have the same challenge, so you can use some of the same technologies.
Okay.
So we have a product that's going in right that's in right now. Basically it's an automated sampler. It takes because since we're not looking under microscopes running with nets and boats and things like that, we can just collect various filter fractions of the water, and then it's all examined using kind of early cancer detection techniques.
Okay.
So 384 well plates. It's
For
automated in the
biosphere
lab.
problems, what are you looking for?
Yeah, so
in the
we're
water?
looking for early signs of infestation of zebra and quagga mussels or other infested things. We can move into
Oh, that's
additional
cool.
species as needed. And we also look at whether they're alive, whether they're dead, if they're responding to treatment, how they're reacting to it, because we're looking at what genes are being turned off and on at the time of collection.
Cool.
And
It's all from a water sample?
yeah, through water.
Ongoing water sample or just one time?
It's a carousel sampler that has like 12 different pots in them, basically filter packs,
Mhm.
and it runs like 2,000 liters through it, and then puts in this buffer that is proprietary for us that keeps anything from breaking down, and then the client just pops it out and ships it to the lab, and we send back the data.
Cool.
So that's what. So right now we're thinking about doing funding because we have revenue right now, but then we can scale that a lot faster and provide revenue for the big longer term project, which we're working on with Bureau of Reclamation, which is my old company. It was a company called Molecular Templates. They just did their IPO. We were reprogramming toxins to attack cancer, and so we're working with Bureau of Rec to reprogram a slightly different toxin to kill zebra mussels. And
Interesting.
so-
Have you raised any money yet?
we haven't done any. I mean, I put in the money that I had from the
From Daily.
IPO and all that kind of stuff. I put in my own money, basically, all of it. So I've done that, but no,
Which,
we
hey,
haven't
you know,
done any.
And this is another thing, credibility. People want to know what skin you have in the game. Right, there's skin in the game. To me, it just endears me to you. I'm like, all right, this dude's all in. I love it. That's a good thing, right?
Yeah. So
You guys all got that, right? Yeah.
So thank you. So that's the idea is that previous companies, biotech companies I've been at, a lot of times you'll have like a diagnostic CRO services division that's basically the fuel to fund the research for the thing that they're actually going for. So that's kind of why we set it up that way. So I guess the question is just, at what point does it make the most sense to seek institutional investment into how hard do you push that? Like how far do you push that? I mean, like how fast do I need to grow? Because right now we're bootstrapping and we're making revenue, and we're on track to be in the black for the year, and that's nice. I mean, I can fund the research that we're doing at Bureau of Rec that way, but
It all comes down to your
not
plan.
enough.
It all
I don't
com-
have enough time.
It all comes down to your plan in terms of how much by when and what you need to get there. So that'd be interesting. We should sit down if you want. We can have a chat about this because I think it's big enough. You could, it's important to think about like what do you need, what are the elements you need around you, and what's that cost look like, and what's the time frame, and what's your cost of going slower or faster to market. Right? There's always a time to market kind of thing. Is there a competitive sort of landscape out there? Do you feel like any competitive pressures? Probably not. But the point is, you have a plan? Do you have a financial plan and a model that represents kind of your idea how to go to market?
Yeah, we do, and that's the thing is, we were at an accelerator previously, and we kind of put all that stuff together, and I was like, great, we have it, it's down. And then I'm a scientist by background, we have a finance guy, we just brought on a new marketing and sales guy who's really great in the space. So we've got them, and then through the course of Mass Challenge and talking to different people or whatnot, we've changed. Originally, the idea was to sell the auto sampler at like a price where we would break even, maybe 20% profit.
Is it a sale or is it like a lease?
Yeah, that's the point. We changed it to the lease model. So now we're doing it.
Should be.
Science as a service. It's a SaaS model.
No, I love it. That's because one, they don't want to upkeep. You want to replace. You're gonna have new things to add into it.
And we
all
just
that
brought
kind of
on
stuff.
some partners to do all the installations, both for Central Texas installations and maintenance. And
Okay. So your question was about institutional funding and the timing.
yeah, timing and like at what level to scale? Because essentially eventually we're gonna have to outgrow our incubator space that we're in now, which requires.
Where are you now?
We're at the Austin Bioscience Incubator. The old
Okay,
Harlem
good.
Mall.
Yeah.
Really awesome space, but eventually we're gonna outgrow it.
How many people do you have now on your team?
4.
4. Yeah. So this one, I'm going to say it depends. I hate to say that to you, but I have to see the model. I have to see kind of like a little bit more of what it is, the plan is. I mean, institutional capital is a big, nice thing to do, and it's a big pain in the neck thing to do. So you got to be careful. You got to ask yourself whether it's worth what you're going to get out of it. I think in your case, I would probably raise $1 million of angel money of people that also you know in your IPO network probably you have credibility with. You could probably, if you had a nice plan, if you package it up, and we could probably help you with some of that, package it up to look good. You could probably raise, I'm guessing, just from people in your IPO that would actually get behind this gig, assuming you have a good reputation, everybody likes you, kind of thing. You know?
Yeah.
I mean,
talk
you know,
around the country a lot. I mean, I think that the high dollar people, a lot of people we've been talking to are people who have lakefront property, and you know.
well,
boats
yeah,
and
people
stuff.
care about this topic. I mean, our waters, our biosphere in the water, how you tell that story. It'd be really interesting to meet with your team and see the marketing guys new, probably just to see what the thinking is around how you spin this from a messaging standpoint and to whom.
Right.
Or to whom, right?
Usually when we get our feedback forms, that's one of our higher marketing things is, you know, clear passion, vision, all that kind of stuff as far as that goes.
Yeah, I have some friends that are an oceanographer down in Miami who teaches. There's a few people that I think would probably be interested. An advisory board would be good in this area too, because there's a lot of people who care about invasive species, I would think, right? There's a whole risk to our underwater ecosystem. I'm a diver, so I kind of get into this at some level. Yeah, I dove in the Mediterranean where it's illegal, actually, but that's why you do it, I guess, right? So you do it because I'm just thinking Mediterranean, like ancient. I wanted to see some stuff maybe I hadn't seen before, right?
Atlantis.
Yeah, I might find somebody under there, and there wasn't a single fish.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable. It was nothing. It was dead. So sad. So, I mean, if you want to talk some more, I'd be happy to talk
Yeah,
about that.
that'd be great. I want to take up everything.
I've got cards if you guys want to chat. But just to end up here, I guess we're kind of way over time, but thank you for sticking around, acting interested. We do this, but we also do this. You can see some of our people there. This is overnight. We do what we do so that we can actually work with orphans and other situations around the world and help them be successful. And we've won some awards around that. Really, it's all about having a purpose in your profit, right? And so we kind of do what we do so that we can, one, help you guys get your gigs off the ground and do well, and then we sort of get juiced out of that, but we give some of the proceeds, what we're doing back, and that's why we do what we do. So, any other questions?
Yeah, one quick question. I know you were on a lot of advisory boards. I'm putting together one right now, and I want to ask you what you thought were exceptional things that you saw, incredible etiquette, or some things that we should also consider doing with our advisory board.
Yeah, there's a lot of, all those ones I was on, they all sucked. Every one of them.
Okay.
There was only one, and that was because they took us to wine country all the time in Napa Valley. They were in Silicon Valley, and they were good guys, and I liked them. Yeah, but it was like, the rest of them were just looking for, a lot of times, this is the thing, don't do an advisory board if you're just looking for somebody to buy your stuff and you put them on your advisory board and try to influence them. Just give them equity if you really want to do that. Don't, so be authentic, right? If you're trying to get an advisory board, there's some do's and don'ts. Let me give you, I thought this through really well, but in general, do get people who play nice together in the sandbox, like any other team. You don't want a dude or a woman who sits there and won't let go of the grapefruit, when you pass around, somebody who talk too much, right? Won't let go of it, have to tell war stories all the time. It's just some people, you don't, it's just very counterproductive to your advisory group. Do get people that have influence and or something to contribute. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but a lot of times people be surprised. And you want to balance it right. You design an advisory board like you would design a team, your team. If you have everybody who's, sales oriented, that's not really, or everybody science oriented, it's not, or everybody marketing oriented, everybody customer oriented, you don't want to have an imbalance. I like to have a little bit of all of it, because I think we need to have some customers that are, here's the other thing, not all customers are the same, right? Like I used to be a CTO and I would have people meet with me every day, and that's how I got decent at seeing gigs and see what was good and what wasn't good. I could pretty much tell you how strong the gig was by the sales guy. And whether I could take him this way or that way, or whether he stuck to his guns, there's just so much you can tell, right? It's the same thing with, everybody's different. There's all kinds of animals in the kingdom, right? You want to get people who are, not necessarily swayed by other people's opinions, who have their own mind, who think through things, in a relatively, have integrity, in what they say. Some people are just motivated by money to get a few shares here. I mean, I just don't want those people. So you build small. It could be 4 to 6 to start. you know. I think having quorum is good, start no less than 3 probably. Get started, or you can just have individual relationships till you get to a point where you have quorum, then you can kind of work it. But it's important to, you know, respect their time, do it on time, do it an hour, make it, you know, and then every once in a while have a gig where you get them all together. When you're successful, fly them in, have a great weekend, you know, do something fun. So like anything else, but let them be part of your, it's the only place you can actually get, like it's, you know, a bigger team than you can afford, right?
Hey Brandon, how much are you giving them in equity across the 2 years?
You know, I can tell you what it was back in the day.
Just so for your
Yeah, I would say it's usually all in, no more than 1% or 2.
for each person?
No, total, for the whole thing.
Everything. Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm talking, it's minimal,
So
but
it's
it's,
a quarter to an eighth of a point every.
yeah, I usually start with an 1/8, and then if they do anything, I can always bump them up. But I'm usually, you know, most people are busy and they don't participate. But if you choose well and you actually make them, like enroll them in what you're doing, most great people will enroll and will actually contribute. So it's all selection, right? So that's important.
I wanted to create a medical advisory board for our company, but we had 2 very different needs. We need the superstar key opinion leaders like what you're talking about, but they're not the ones that do the work. They're more the show ponies. I need a board of medical advisors that are really willing to get their, like roll up their sleeves and do some work
Why?
at the same time. There's some advice that we need on the specialty side around testing of our devices. That's
Okay,
really important.
so that's fine. That's a little bit more of a technical advisory board, then very specific purpose, and it's a little different than the general advisory board I'm talking about here. So you can have a chief science, a lot of people have science advisory boards or technical advisory boards for different reasons, and that's usually product development or something in that, more in that side. What I'm talking about is general, how do you get market lift, make things happen, you know, just a general, once you actually have a product that's ready to go to market kind of thing. So, yeah. All right, well, no other questions? Thank you for your time, and like I said, I'd be happy to have a coffee with any of you and talk. It sounds like I was really impressed with the quality of